All right, just getting prepped for paint here. Taping off my varnished rub rails. It's just too hard to try and do any kind of cutting underneath this edge here. I usually try and just do things freehand a lot of the time, but in this case it makes much more sense to just tape it all off, even as annoying as the taping might be. My goal is to try and get the first one or two coats on with a brush, and then probably do a sanding job. And then I'd like to try and apply the rest of the coats with spray gun. And I don't know how well that'll go. I'm kind of hoping the weather lightens up enough that I can move the boat to spray it outside. That I can move it back in here for drying, but just to keep overspray to a minimum, do it outside. Arguably the most tedious part of taping things is getting into corners. So when you're doing that, often I'll either cut tape at sort of a slight angle, so just only one corner of the tape needs to get in there, or I'll just think about using one piece of tape, like this first piece of tape I put in here hits the corner. The next one doesn't have to go right to the same corner. It can hold back a little bit so long as it's touching the planking. And then knowing as I try to paint in between this blocking here, I'm going to end up touching my inwale a little bit. I'm just putting some tape around that inwale. Wrapping it up on the inside a little bit. If I get to spraying, I'll have to get some more tape in here. Either I'll tape off this whole thing and not worry about spraying up into these voids, or I'll have to do a little more taping to hit the back sides of these inwales. I won't worry about the face of them for now. When it comes to spraying time, I'll add another piece of tape at that time. Having a tape dispenser makes this job a whole lot easier, I'll tell you that much. I'll always try and find a moment to fold over a little piece of tape to be so that you've got a grab handle when it comes to removing it. That makes quite a big difference. And I made a point of acquiring some 3/4 inch tape so that I could wrap right around the blocking here, getting right up inside against the end grain. It's because of all this taping that I really wanted to try and get my in-wales done first, or my gunnels could get all that varnish work done in one shot, but don't have that opportunity. We'll have to do a little more taping afterwards, just in the holes to isolate these when I recoat. And I can just get around the front edge here. I don't have to worry about painting right back to the planking on the underside. Okay. Now this is just to cover this edge right in here. Come on. Totalboat Elixir. On this project, I wanted to use Totalboat's waterborne finishes. I'm trying to make that shift away from solvent-based products for finishing because they're really invasive in the workshop here. My workshop's in my house. Ventilating the space is really difficult, especially in the winter time, which seems to be a lot of the time when I do a lot of finishing. So I want to play around with this stuff. Just plain old white for the outside of the boat. And for the inside, we're going with classic whaler blue. Well, this top strike is always going to be problematic here. Get my shirt down into that hole. Maybe we'll work from like here down and I'll finish up this top strake last. So let's see. See how this stuff lays down. Of course, you got to start in the most awkward part, which is up here. Ooh, so far so good. Pretty decent coverage. So I cut this blue down about 10% by weight. Just cut in some white. It's so blue that I really felt like I needed to take it back a notch. It was just so incredibly electric, you know. It's still pretty darn bright. I like it. Kind of nice having something that isn't like just varnished or white for a change. Lays down nicely, I'll say that much about it. Like it feels like it's got a good flow. Hard to see what's going on here, to be honest, but and it's equally hard trying to work left-handed when I'm right-handed. So my general impression is this stuff lays down onto the plywood quite nicely. It's telegraphing. It's not quite as opaque on the yellow cedar here. You know, it lifts off a bit easy. On the epoxied surfaces, it's not laying down quite as heavily, which is a little, well, not unexpected, I would say, but it's one thing about oil-based paints that tend to lay down a bit nicer in that respect. It's closer. It is so awkward painting stuff like this. This is why I want to get over to spray finishing as quickly as possible. This brush is not behaving very nicely. It's sort of, the bristles are kind of spreading on me, which is super annoying. Okay, let's see. It's the point at which you gotta find your breaks. So I think I want to do the other side of this. And then move forward once I've got that done. So the claim is that this stuff is self-priming. I don't know. I mean, I certainly would like to see a greater opacity to this on the first coat, if that's really the claim. I kind of hate it. I'm not a big fan of the self-priming paint because I don't feel like it ever really lives up to that name. I'm right now wishing I had like a nice neutral gray primer all over this thing. But not much you can do about that now. Well, we're the next day. Coverage on this paint is a little spotty on this first coat. I suppose it's to be expected, but I sure would like it to be a little more opaque for sure. I mean, there's more coats to come, so it's not the end of the world. What I'm going to do today, is I got a lot of tiny little holes, little pinholes and stuff like that. Well, not a lot, but there's a bunch that didn't get got earlier on because they're hard to see. I expected this, but we'll give this the once over. Now that I have paint on it, I can use Bondo to fill stuff like that. Just because it's fast, I want to get another coat of paint on here today. And man, this blue is electric. This is a lot more vivid than I like. I mean, like, this is like 1980s kind of vivid. It almost needs like a hot pink to go along with it. So definitely not my taste. So I think I'm going to try and cut this down even some more. This was already cut. What did I have? For every 800 grams of the blue, I added 70 grams of white. So I'm almost thinking I might just double that ratio. Try and bring this down. I want it to be like a rich sky blue, I think, is closer to the color I would like. I mean, Joe wanted something that was sort of in that bright blue range, but I don't think this bright was what he was hoping for. Anyhow, it feels weird to me for it to be quite this vivid, so I'm thinking I'll knock it back a little more. It was not a fast process putting paint on this thing yesterday. Probably at least a good solid 3 hours to get all the way around the boat. Working with these water-based paints is a bit funny. I mean, they don't flow out the way oil-based does, and they have this curious quality about them wherein you put them on, they look thick and heavy like an oil-based, but then they shrink back as they dry, and so that all of a sudden all this texture is showing that wasn't showing before, which is not a terrible thing because they look like you cannot get a nice smooth brush stroke on them while they're wet. So that always like throws me off, makes me think it's just gonna be this horrible streaky job. And then as it dries, it sort of doesn't flow out, but it flattens out, kind of. I think it's one of those things you just have to keep working with it so that you're used to it and your expectations are different. Anyhow, it's nice painting without a respirator on, that's for sure. That makes things a little more comfortable. So I'm going to get out some Bondo. We'll do a little spot patching and then we'll get back to putting another coat on. All right, I'm still struggling to get used to this water-based finish stuff. Now, you think this wouldn't be a big deal, given that I'm, used to messing around with acrylic paints to, do house painting and that sort of thing. And certainly from an artist's perspective, I've used tons of water-based stuff, but I really haven't gotten into using these water-based finishes just for an overall, single coat paint job. And certainly these products are not the same as acrylics by a long shot. They're very, very different. I really wish I could be spraying right now, but the barrier to getting a coat of to be set up for spray at the immediate moment is just really high. Got to be able to move the boat to do it. Need to set up a tent to do it. It's snowing outside. Don't have the heat. Even the driveway is full of boats and cars all covered in snow, and so I don't really want to take the hours it takes to get set up just to avoid doing a brushing. I'm just going to hand brush the next coat, and in the interim over the next couple days, maybe I get a chance to set up the tents and I can finish off with spraying. So a couple things that I've found I can't do that I normally do. Normally I would reuse my paint pots from one coat to the next. Can't do that. I found the water-based finish actually lifts off the old one, at least from the paint pot, and then I was getting little bits and pieces of junk mixed in with the last coat, which was rather surprising to me, but it was doing that. Something I can do with oil paints, no problem. Use them the next day. Just finding a brush that feels right has not been going well. I like these little short stumpy brushes a lot of the time, just because I find with boats there's always, especially up in the ends, there's just not a lot of room to get up into the bow and stuff. And so I've gotten used to having these short brushes for getting up in there, and I really like those. But they just don't carry this paint particularly well. Well, they do okay, but it doesn't feel right. The oval brush, that worked okay, but not quite the way I wanted. I found that just a regular natural bristle brush actually, at least at the beginning, it seemed to carry the paint a bit better, but then it stopped doing that so well. I might try this bigger hog bristle brush for the broad strokes and see if that works for me. And then of course there's foam brushes, which I've never had a feel for, and I would be willing to try this right now if only I had one that was, wider than this little 1.5 inch, 2 inch jobby. I might give it a shot. In fact, I will give it a shot just to see, but they always seem like weird and ineffective to me. Anyhow, I'm going to mix up some more paint. So I've been doing it by weight. So I've discovered each of these containers has about 800 grams of paint in there. which is, just shy of a liter. It's a quart. US quart, 946 milliliters. That should equivalent to 946 grams. When I weighed out the last batch, I got like 800 out of this container, which seems a bit weird. Maybe the ingredients maybe the measurements aren't super accurate. What we'll do is we'll do a comparison. Let's see. Okay. 36 grams for the empty package. Yeah, 865 for the filled package. $36 grams, 865, or 866. Yeah, it's bouncing around. Come on, why are you changing? Call it 866 because it makes it easier. Leaving 830 for the paint. I find mixing it like this, like you can't just, they don't quite shake up the way you would shake up a can. I guess they sort of do, but a whole lot of scrunching. It's weird. So we'll do it in half batches. I found if I tried to mix up the full batch, it was just a little bit, well, I had to bring my wand up a bit high for my comfort. So we'll zero that out. It's going to be 415 grams of paint. Need something pokey. Yep. On zero. See, it's funny. Half that does not feel like I've got the same half in here. Doesn't feel like it at all. Okay, now the white. So I need 270 grams of white for this whole thing, so 135. That's what I came up with, so we'll zero this out. Come on. A little overboard. We're gonna make two batches and mix them together anyway. Okay. Got an idea. Okay. Okay, put that to the side. Scale. 0. I hope this is the one that's unmixed. Yeah, okay. What I found is I gotta squeeze this down here. I quite like this little aspect of these bags, actually, the fact that you can kind of squeeze them down like a tube of toothpaste and get all that paint out of there. See, it's funny how the numbers don't seem to want to work out exactly right. So that's 400. Where's my other 30 grams of paint? Could there be really 30 grams left in this little... Yeah, maybe. A less than exact science, I suppose. Okay. Oh. Well, not quite. 415. A little shy. No matter. Go. So I'm using the oyster white that I have here, which has got a touch of yellow in it, probably a little bit of red, and I think what's happening with there's just the slightest drop of red when it's mixing with the green that's in with the this blue here. It browns it down a little bit and takes the sort of the sharp edge out of it. I found this aqua blue was just like so intense. I didn't like it. All right, so I'm going to let that drain. I'm going to mix it back in to the jug with the other batch, scrumble them all together, and in fact I got a little bit of leftovers somewhere in here. I got a little leftovers from the very first batch, so I'll add that to it as well. Keep it consistent. And then we'll apply our coats. And then I'll have enough. It takes about half a quart, or a little less, probably about a third of a quart to hand brush these. And so the remaining will be enough to get probably like 4 or 5 spray coats on. By the time those are done, it should look pretty sweet, really nice and consistent. Use a wax paper, clean cloth, paint pot. You also keep another cloth on hand. Choose your weapon. I think I'm going to start with this little shorty and see how this works for me. This one I think worked best, better than the other ones. Now I always start by doing the entire bow cavity, and then I work back from there, going down one side of the boat, coming back up the other. I tried getting in there with the roller yesterday. It was a disaster. What I really dislike about this stuff is that when you're putting it on, it doesn't feel like you put on a good coat. Like it always looks kind of transparent, translucent, and ineffective. And it really kind of throws me off my game big time. Now I know it changes as it dries, but it just feels so weird. I guess you got to get over the fact that what you're doing right now might look terrible, but it'll look okay when you're done, which is such a hard thing to get used to. So just work my way down. I guess I'll finish up with the stem this time instead of doing it first. See, this is where having the short brush is really helpful. Even with the short brush, I'm running into a traffic jam here. I'm really glad I taped off and papered the whole underside of the deck here. I'm pretty much just working by feel. I cannot really get my head down in there to see what I'm doing.
Now while I'm getting this coat of paint on, I want to remind you that these videos are supported by my followers on Patreon. This week I want to give a shout out to Thomas Wherry for joining us. If you'd like to join me on Patreon, I'd really appreciate that. You can find links in the corner or down in the description. And I also want to thank Totalboat for supplying some of the materials for this project. You can get 5% off your purchase from Totalboat by following my affiliate link in the description. I get a little kickback from that, and that also helps support these videos. Now learning to work with these marine grade water-based polyurethanes was a little bit of an uphill climb. Mostly I had to learn to assume that whatever I see while I'm applying them is not what I'm going to see when they're cured. That's a little bit of a hump to wrap my head around that, but I'll get used to it. Now if this weather clears up, maybe we can get on to some spray finishing. But that'll be next time on building the Catalina Wherry. I hope you'll join me.
Okay, we'll call that good, even though it looks bad.